It was just past midnight in Windsor Castle. The corridors were silent, the kind of silence that almost listens back. Prince William had returned from a long private dinner, his mind still heavy with memories of his mother, Diana. But that night, something unusual caught his eye. An envelope yellowed by time slipped inside an old photo album that hadn't been opened in years. The handwriting was unmistakable. "My darling boy." Inside was a letter that would change everything. A truth his mother had buried for her sons to uncover one day. A truth that didn't just question the monarchy's past, it shattered its illusion. What was Diana trying to tell him? And why was this letter hidden all these years? Before we uncover what William found that night, take a moment. Hit like, subscribe, and tap that notification bell so you never miss these emotional royal stories. If you believe Diana's voice still echoes through her sons, share this video and drop your thoughts below, because tonight we're diving into a secret that could rewrite royal history. It was one of those nights in Windsor Castle when the world outside seemed to sleep under a silver hush. The rain had stopped hours ago, but its scent still lingered in the corridors, that earthy calm that follows a storm. Prince William walked quietly through the dimly lit hallway, his steps echoing softly against the marble floor. He had just returned from a private engagement, something formal and draining, one of those royal duties that looked elegant on camera, but left him feeling hollow inside. The palace staff had retired, the lights were dimmed, and only the steady tick of an antique clock kept him company. He passed by his mother's old photographs in the drawing room, the same ones he'd seen countless times before. But tonight, he stopped. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps it was something deeper, an instinct that whispered, "Look closer." William's gaze lingered on a framed picture, Diana holding him and Harry in the garden of Kensington Palace. She looked radiant, wind in her hair, laughter caught mid-breath. But behind that photo, the frame seemed slightly uneven. He reached out, carefully removing it from the wall. Behind it was an old oak shelf, lined with photo albums, the kind his mother loved to fill with tiny notes, pressed flowers, and her graceful handwriting. He opened one. Dust rose in the air like faint ghosts of memories. Inside were pictures from the early 90s, family trips, royal tours, candid smiles. He turned each page slowly, his fingers tracing moments he barely remembered. And then, something unusual slipped loose. A folded envelope, old and yellowed, tucked between the pages. The handwriting stopped him cold. It was hers, "My darling boy." His heart seemed to stop just for a moment. He sat down, his breath unsteady. This wasn't something the archives had catalogued, not one of the carefully preserved royal letters. This was persona, hidden intentionally, away from the polished world of monarchy. He hesitated. Should he open it? After all these years, was he ready to hear his mother's voice again? Not through memories, but through her own words. He looked around the room. The portraits of past kings and queens stared down from their frames, cold, silent, eternal. And yet, for the first time, William didn't feel like a prince. He felt like a son, a boy who'd lost his mother far too soon. He broke the seal. The faint scent of lavender rose, his mother's favorite. The paper had faded, but her handwriting was still graceful, almost alive. His eyes moved slowly over the first lines. "If you are reading this, it means my heart was right to worry. There are things you must one day know, my dear William." His throat tightened. The words seemed to speak directly from her, the tone gentle but heavy with emotion, like she knew she wouldn't have the chance to say them aloud. She wrote about love, about her hopes for him and Harry, about wanting them to be kind men before they were royal men. But then her words shifted. There was fear. They will try to protect the image, not the truth. Remember that, William. You must one day decide which one you'll serve. He froze. What did she mean by they? His mind raced. The palace, the institution, his father.
The rain outside began again, softly tapping against the window. It almost sounded like a heartbeat, steady, insistent. William read on, his breath shallow, as his mother hinted at a secret she couldn't put plainly in words. Something about a lie that guards a crown and the cost of silence. He leaned back, eyes wide, the letter trembling slightly in his hands. He'd spent years trying to understand his mother's lost years, the loneliness, the paranoia people had dismissed as imagination. But now, sitting alone in that silent room, her fears suddenly felt painfully real. There was more. A second page. If one day you find this, know that I never wanted to leave you with anger. Only truth. The truth they won't tell you. He stopped reading for a moment. The air felt heavier, the walls almost pressing in. 1,000 questions spun in his head. What truth? Why hide it? And how long had this letter been sitting here, waiting for him to find it? He placed the letter down gently on the table. His reflection in the nearby glass cabinet looked older than he felt, the weight of duty, of loss, of secrets pressing on his shoulders. He thought of Harry, of how their paths had drifted apart. Maybe this was something they should read together. But then again, maybe not yet. This felt personal, like a message meant for him alone. William looked back at the letter one more time, then at the photo of Diana smiling beside her boys. It was almost as if she were watching, waiting for him to understand what she couldn't say aloud. A shiver ran down his spine. He folded the letter carefully, returning it to its envelope. But something told him this was only the beginning, that the letter wasn't just a mother's words of love. It was a key to something buried, something dangerous, something that had been hidden deep within the royal walls for decades. As he stood up, the distant clock struck 1. The sound echoed through the corridors, solemn and slow. William turned off the light, but before leaving, he whispered softly, almost to himself, almost to her, "I'll find the truth, Mom. I promise." And somewhere, in that still, ancient silence, it almost felt like she heard him. William didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dim glow of a single lamp, the letter spread open before him like a relic. The words pulled him in, fragile, trembling, alive. Each line seemed to breathe his mother's presence back into the room. He'd read it once, then again, slower this time, tracing every loop of her handwriting. The ink had bled slightly at the edges, probably from tears or rain, but her words were steady. It was Diana's voice exactly as he remembered it, soft, warm, but edged with quiet defiance. "The truth they fear most isn't about love or duty," she had written. "It's about what happens when the crown forgets the human heart beneath it." William stared at that sentence for a long time. It was so her, so full of heart and warning, poetry and pain all mixed together. He remembered her once saying, "Being a princess isn't a fairy tale, darling. It's a performance." And the audience never stops watching. Back then, he hadn't understood. But now, reading her words by the faint light of dawn, he did. The next morning, he took the letter into the garden, Diana's favorite place when she needed to think. The grass was still wet with dew, and the sun hung low, brushing the sky with soft gold. He sat on the stone bench beneath a willow tree, the same one she planted when he was a boy. As the breeze stirred, he read the second page again. "There is something the palace will never tell you, William. They will protect the image at any cost. But remember, you deserve to know who you are and what was taken from you." His heart raced. What was taken? He thought back to the years after her passing, the rumors, the strange silences, the questions no one answered. His mother had often spoken of feeling trapped, that she knew too much and trusted too little. Now it all made sense. Was she trying to warn him about something that happened before her death? Or something that might still be happening now? He folded the letter again, his fingers trembling slightly. He'd been raised to follow protocol, to obey, to protect, to maintain dignity. But this letter wasn't about duty. It was about truth. And for the first time, truth scared him. That evening, William couldn't shake the feeling that someone might already know he'd found it. The castle staff seemed unusually careful, the kind of politeness that hides nervousness. A footman glanced at the study door more than once. A butler asked, almost too casually, if His Royal Highness had discovered anything of interest in the archives. It sent a chill through him. He didn't answer. He simply nodded, dismissing them with a kind smile. But inside, his mother's words echoed like a heartbeat. They will protect the image, not the truth. He locked the letter in his private safe that night, hidden behind a painting only he knew how to move. Yet even with it secured, he couldn't rest. Every creak of the hallway, every faint sound outside his window, made him turn his head. He began to wonder, how long had it been hidden? Who placed it there? Did his mother trust anyone to know? He knew Diana had been close to a few, her sister, Sarah, her butler, Paul, and one or two others who'd stayed loyal after her death. Perhaps one of them had hidden it, knowing that someday William would need it. That thought brought a lump to his throat. It meant that even in her last months, she had planned for this, a way for her voice to reach him when she no longer could. 3 days later, William arranged a quiet visit to Althorpe, Diana's childhood home. He didn't tell the palace, not even his aides. Only one man drove him, an old friend from his military days, someone who understood silence. The long road to Althorpe was lined with trees heavy with autumn leaves. As they rustled in the wind, it almost sounded like whispers, faint, familiar. When he reached the grounds, the air felt different. He walked toward the lake where his mother was buried, letter in hand. The water was still, reflecting the gray sky like glass. He sat by the edge, opened the letter once more, and whispered, "What did you mean, Mum?" The question floated into the air and disappeared, leaving only silence. Then, as if by memory, fragments of old conversations returned to him. His mother talking about arrangements she didn't trust, about papers she'd wanted to keep hidden, about how truth in that family was never safe for long. Could this be about her fears before the accident? About people she believed were watching her? His pulse quickened. He remembered her words from an old interview. "I'd like to be a queen of people's hearts, but I don't think I'll ever be queen of this country." At the time, it sounded poetic. Now it felt like prophecy. He folded the letter and looked across the still water. For the first time in years, William didn't just miss his mother. He felt her presence, not in a mystical way, but in the kind of quiet that follows truth. That night, back in London, William called his private secretary and requested an unscheduled meeting with one of the family's oldest archivists. No press, no paperwork, just a private discussion about historical records. When the man arrived, William handed him the envelope. "Have you ever seen this handwriting before?" The archivist blinked, studied the letter, then hesitated. "Your mother's, sir, without a doubt. But this letter is not listed in the official records. It's off the books." William's jaw tightened. "I know." The man looked uneasy. "Then may I ask, how did you come across it?" William met his eyes, calm but firm. "Let's just say it found me." The archivist nodded slowly. "Then, Your Highness, you should know, there are whispers that Lady Diana wrote more than one letter like this. Hidden, distributed to trusted friends, meant to be found by her sons when the time was right." William's heart pounded. "More letters? How many?" he asked. "No one knows. But one rumor says one of them names a royal secret she feared most." The room went quiet. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. William leaned back in his chair, staring at the single candle flickering between them. He felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, not as a future king, but as a son caught between loyalty and love. He looked down at the letter again, his mother's signature glowing faintly in the candlelight. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this wasn't over. He'd opened a door he couldn't close, and what lay behind it might not just change what he knew about his mother. It could rewrite royal history itself. The morning after his meeting with the archivist, William woke with a heaviness he couldn't shake. The words "there are more letters" played in his mind over and over, like an echo he couldn't silence. For years, he had accepted the story the palace told, about his mother, her life, her death. But now, every polished statement, every official line from the past 2 decades felt hollow. The letter had changed everything. He sat by his desk in Kensington Palace, staring out at the gray London skyline. Diana's words still haunted him. They will protect the image, not the truth. He whispered under his breath, "You were right, Mum." That day, he made a quiet decision. No announcements, no advisers. He would look for the truth himself. William began by visiting the old storage rooms within the palace, places few people went in them all. Shelves stacked with dusty boxes, files labeled with royal initials, and folders containing documents from past generations. He'd been here before, as a boy, playing hide-and-seek with Harry among the trunks. But this time, every corner seemed to carry the weight of hidden history. Hours passed. He opened file after file, official letters, reports, travel records, all neatly preserved. But something caught his attention, an old, unmarked leather folder tucked behind a row of ledgers from the 1990s. The date on the folder's edge matched the final year of his mother's life. His pulse quickened. He opened it carefully. Inside were several sheets of paper, stamped private, for internal review only. They referenced matters pertaining to the Princess of Wales and mentioned unverified concerns regarding institutional oversight. That phrase, institutional oversight, chilled him. Diana had once told her friend she feared being watched. The press claimed she was paranoid. But here, buried in royal files, were documents confirming she was being monitored by her own circle. William's hands tightened around the papers. The truth his mother had warned him about was beginning to take shape. Later that evening, he met quietly with a former royal aide, one who had served under both his grandmother and his mother. The man, now in his 70s, carried a heaviness in his eyes. William didn't waste words. "Tell me what you know about my mother's final months. The truth, not the official story." The man looked down, then back at him. "Your mother," she was frightened. Not of the public, not of the press, of what she had learned. William leaned forward. What did she learn? The aide hesitated, then spoke softly, that certain people within the palace were hiding financial links and information she wasn't supposed to see. She believed it was tied to charity funds, diverted without her consent. She said it proved the crown's public face was built on something false. She was going to expose it. William sat still, his heart beat loud in his ears. The man's voice cracked slightly. She trusted only a handful of people, and she said if anything ever happened to her, her sons would find the truth one day, in her own words. The letter, William realized now, this wasn't just a mother's emotional farewell. It was a breadcrumb trail, leading him to the very secret she had died trying to reveal. That night, unable to sleep, William drove alone to the Spencer estate again. The moon was bright, and the fields glowed in pale silver. He parked near the lake, the same place he'd sat before, and walked slowly to his mother's resting place. He knelt by the water and whispered, "You knew, didn't you? You saw the lie for what it was." The silence around him felt almost sacred. The willow branches swayed gently, like they were listening. He took out his phone and opened the scanned copy of her letter. He reread the final lines. "If one day you must choose between truth and power, choose truth. For only truth can set you free and protect those who come after you." He closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. He had to decide now. Should he reveal what he knew, risk the storm that would follow, or keep it buried, like generations before him had done? The lie wasn't just about money. It was about reputation, the illusion that the monarchy was untouched by the same corruption that plagued ordinary institutions. His mother had seen the cracks, and they had silenced her for it. William clenched his jaw. Not in them all. The next morning, he arranged a discreet meeting with his father. It wasn't formal, no advisors, no cameras. Just father and son, behind closed doors at Clarence's house. Charles listened quietly as William placed a photocopy of Diana's letter on the table. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Charles sighed, his expression unreadable. "You found it." William frowned. "You knew?" His father's eyes lowered. "I knew she had written something. Your grandmother ordered it sealed away, for the family's sake." "For the family's sake." William's tone sharpened. "She was trying to tell us the truth." Charles's face softened. "And what would that truth change, William? The world already made its judgment long ago. Bringing it up now would only reopen old wounds." William stared at him, disbelief washing over his face. "So we just pretend? Keep living this lie because it's easier." Charles's voice was weary. "Sometimes a crown requires silence. It's not cowardice, it's survival." Those words hit William harder than he expected. He realized then how deep the roots of silence ran. It wasn't just one secret. It was a system built on them. That night, back at home, William stood by his window, watching the city lights flicker below. The letter rested on his desk beside a single candle. The flame wavered in the still air, casting long shadows. He thought of his mother's words again. The truth they fear most isn't about love or duty. It's about what happens when the crown forgets the human heart beneath it. He finally understood. This wasn't just a secret about money or politics or betrayal. It was about humanity, about empathy lost in the machinery of power. The hidden royal lie wasn't one single event. It was a pattern, the choice to protect image over honesty, appearance over compassion. And as he looked at the letter one last time, he realized the next step wasn't about vengeance. It was about redemption. William folded the letter carefully, placed it back in its envelope, and whispered, "You won't be forgotten, Mum. Not this time." The wind outside picked up, carrying with it the faint scent of rain, the same scent that filled the night he found her letter. But now, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning. The days that followed were quiet, at least on the surface. But inside William, something had changed forever. The letter had awakened a part of him that had long been buried under duty, decorum, and silence. Every public smile, every ribbon cutting, every speech about service now carried a hidden heartbeat, his mother's voice whispering behind it all, "Choose truth." He had spent weeks going over every line of a letter, every clue she'd left behind. The more he read, the clearer it became. She hadn't written this just to warn him. She'd written it to prepare him, to remind him that one day he would face a moment where the crown's weight would test a man beneath it. And that moment had come. It was a rainy afternoon when William made his decision. He sat alone in his study, staring out at the gray clouds rolling over London, the same kind of sky that had hung over her funeral so many years ago. He whispered softly, "It's time." But it wouldn't be a grand announcement or a headline that would set the tabloids ablaze. No, Diana wouldn't have wanted that. She believed in quiet strength, in truth delivered not through scandal, but through sincerity. That evening, he drafted a speech for an upcoming Royal Foundation event, one that focused on integrity, compassion, and transparency in leadership. He poured everything he'd learned from his mother's words into it. He wrote, "We must remember that the power of any institution lies not in its image, but in its heart. And when we forget the humanity behind the duty, we'll lose more than trust. We'll lose ourselves." It was subtle, poised, but those who knew, who understood the history behind those words, would hear the echo of Diana's voice. He didn't expose the hidden royal lie directly. Instead, he began dismantling it piece by piece, through example, through action, through quiet rebellion disguised as reform. A week later, William stood before the cameras. The hall was filled with reporters, ministers, and members of the public. He looked calm, confident, almost regal, but inside he carried his mother's letter like a torch. As he spoke, his voice was steady but soft, every word deliberate. He talked about change, about compassion, about rebuilding trust between the monarchy and the people. But what caught everyone's attention was one particular line. "Some truths," he said, "are meant to be whispered across generations until someone is finally brave enough to say them out loud." The whole fell silent. Those words weren't in the official transcript. They were his. Behind the cameras, his father sat in quiet contemplation, eyes downcast. For the first time in years, he seemed to understand. This was not rebellion. This was healing. That night, after the event, William returned to Kensington. He asked everyone to leave him alone for a while. He walked once more into the room where he'd first found the letter, the photo album still neatly stacked, the air thick with the ghosts of memory. He placed the letter back into the album, exactly where it had been. Only this time, he added something new, a handwritten note of his own. "Mum, I found your truth, and I'll carry it, not in anger, but in love. You taught me that the greatest strength isn't silence. It's honesty with grace." He smiled faintly, his eyes glistening. Then he closed the album, placed it back on the shelf, and whispered into the stillness, "Thank you." The light flickered in the hallway, catching the edge of Diana's framed smile on the wall. For a brief second, it almost felt like she was there, watching, proud, peaceful. In the weeks that followed, William began to quietly shift things behind the scenes. He launched initiatives for greater transparency in royal charities. He strengthened privacy protection for royal staff, something Diana had often spoken about. He refused to allow his mother's legacy to be remembered only through tragedy. And slowly, the people noticed. Newspapers ran headlines about a gentler, more grounded future king. Commentators spoke of a new royal philosophy, one that seemed to echo Diana's heart. But only William knew where it had begun. Not in a boardroom, not in a press conference, but in the still of the night, with an old letter and a mother's truth. Months later, he took his family to Althorpe. The air was warm, the sky open and blue. George and Charlotte ran along the lakeside, laughing, their reflections rippling in the water. Catherine stood beside him, her hand in his, her smile soft and knowing. He didn't tell the children everything, not yet. But one day, he would. One day, when they were ready, they'd understand that their grandmother wasn't just a princess. She was a compass. William looked out at the water, sunlight dancing across its surface. "Mum," he said quietly, "you were right. The truth does set us free." The wind picked up, carrying the sound of children's laughter through the trees, the same willow that had shaded her for years. And for the first time in a long, long while, he felt peace. As night fell, William stood on the palace balcony, the city lights glittering like 1,000 tiny stars. He held the letter one last time, its edges worn, the ink faint. He didn't need to read it anymore. He'd memorized every word, every emotion. He folded it gently and placed it in a small wooden box engraved with her initials, D.S. Then, locking it away, he whispered, "Your truth lives through us now." Behind him, the clock struck midnight, the same hour he'd found the letter all those nights ago. But this time, the silence didn't haunt him. It comforted him. Diana's truth had come full circle. And with that, the heir to the throne, no longer just a prince, but a son, walked back inside, carrying the light of his mother's legacy into a new dawn. If this story moved you, don't just scroll away. Hit like, subscribe, and share this video. Let Diana's truth echo through more hearts. Tell us in the comments. White right pointing backhand index, do you think William should one day reveal the full truth his mother left behind? Your voice keeps a story alive, because some legacies aren't written in history books. They are written in love, loss, and the courage to face the truth. Rose sparkles.